Hello again and welcome to another Mordian Mondays. This is episode 66. And this week, guys, I have been working on putting together and painting the final units of my Imperial Japanese Army for bolt action. And I can announce that I have now fully completed and armed this operational battle station. Probably butchered that quote. But I have now completed my Imperial Japanese Army to the point where they can be used in a both friendly and semi-competitive manner. So I've got together a decent selection of units. And before we get into and actually what I painted this week is I worked on my Kai Shinto Chi-Ha Type 97 tank, which is a medium tank for the Japanese, and no, it's a heavy tank for the Japanese. It was a medium or light tank by everyone else's standards. God, those crazy Japanese bastards and their tanks. But yeah, I actually really enjoyed painting this vehicle. And the reason that I'm just showing the tank at the moment, guys, and not the full army, those pictures will be coming in a moment, is I just wanted to say that I think these pictures of this tank may be the best photographs I've ever taken of some models. I don't know what it is. I got the lighting just right. I got the adjustment on the camera just right. I got the angles just right. Honestly, it was just when I took those pictures, I was like, wow, I actually took those. So not to get big headed and break an arm, jerk myself off, but I just really like how these pictures turned out. Just want to say, speaking of the vehicle itself, and not of my amazing photography skills. I really like how this vehicle turned out. I really enjoy painting the Japanese armour camo. I really enjoy painting it. I've always been really scared to do tank camo because I don't, the way I do my painting, I'm a bit old school, guys. You know this. I love the old paintbrush. I'm not into my airbrushes. I've no criticism against airbrushes. I think they're an invaluable tool, and you can see entire armies painted with them. I don't know what it is. I tend to find that airbrushing armies all look just really similar. But anyway, so I tend to find that I just like painting. But to be honest, I like painting by paintbrush. I just prefer it. It's the way I've done it since I was 5 years old. You can't teach an old dog new tricks. Yeah, so I really enjoyed painting this camouflage. I've always been scared of painting tank camo because I tend to do it by brush. But it turned out that it's really easy if you just take your time and thin your paints and all this kind of stuff. And I did do this tank camo scheme on another one of my vehicles, on my Hargo light tank in the first wave of the Japanese when I was putting together the Japanese army originally. And yeah, it was really fun. And then that's a very small tank, and this is a sort of a medium-sized model now. So I'm just getting used to doing the camo scheme on a slightly bigger model. But here are the pictures of the full army. It's quite a lot of dudes. I actually haven't counted them all up. You can probably count them in the picture, but it's at least 60 infantry because I bought two 30-man boxes, and then I've got loads of support teams. So it's probably about 80 infantry overall, 80 or 90. And then I've got three vehicles. Really enjoyed putting the time together. So what have I got in it? Well, I've got a whole bunch of riflemen. A whole load of them. In fact, the core of the army is riflemen. And the reason for that is that you can take them as veterans. And also that the Japanese want to be getting into combat, and you don't really want to be spending lots and lots of points on things like light machine guns in your squads. Even things like SMGs, you're probably not that interested in. They're okay in combat, but you're not going to be benefiting from their shooting almost at all because you want to be banzaiing forward. So yeah, the core of the army is just a whole truckload of riflemen, which I'll probably run as veteran riflemen, just that they're just really horrible to try and deal with. Backing that up will be a mortar and backing that up as to what models I've got a medium machine gun team, I've got a medium mortar team. Medium machine gun is I don't know why, I just love the Japanese machine gun. It wasn't actually that good in World War II. It had a very slow rate of fire. It was nicknamed the Woodpecker. So unlike the Germans, who Hitler's buzzsaw would just fire out almost a straight stream of bullets, the Japanese machine gun had a very slow rate of fire. It was like pop, 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 pop. And but the Japanese, the reason they did this is because it basically never overheated. It had a slow rate of fire, and it had it was strip fed, so it wasn't belt fed. So you didn't put like a belt of 100 rounds through, and then when the belt ran out, you had to mess around putting another belt in. It was strip fed with basically 30 bullets in each strip, and the theory behind it was, as long as you can keep shoving strips in there, and you can put one strip in just as another one finishes, you will have and the gun never overheats, you will have a never-ending continuous stream of fire, which is really good for suppressing enemies if you're going to attack them, and it's also quite good if someone's trying to attack you, because especially in the European theatre, the Allies would wait when they were facing a machine gun, they would try and wait for the Germans to have to change the barrel or replace the belt and dash forward a few dozen yards if they could before lying down again. Against the Japanese machine gun, in theory, if they have enough of these belts of bullets, you're not gonna, you can't dash forward because it's constantly firing. The problem was that simply the Japanese didn't have the munitions to back it up. And by the end of the war, they were sending people into battle with bamboo spears. They didn't have enough bullets to keep up the continuous rate of fire, which is a shame, because in theory it's quite a good... Well, it's not a shame, because obviously they were the bad guys, we wanted them to lose, but it's a shame because obviously it meant that they couldn't, that combat doctrine, it had a glaring flaw in it, essentially. It relied on quite a strong logistics chain. But yeah, so anyway, spent this whole video talking about the machine gun. I just love the woodpecker machine gun. So I've got medium machine gun, got a medium mortar, I've got a medium anti-tank gun, which it's actually, I think this is the late war model medium anti-tank gun. I quite like it. Originally I had this as my main anti-tank punch, but I learnt the hard way after a few battles about action that fixed emplacement medium anti-tank guns, or anti-tank guns in general, they can be easily outmaneuvered, and yeah, they're just if you're paying for a medium anti-tank gun and then taking a light tank, you're actually ending up just paying more points for the same thing. So I realised that fixed emplacement medium anti-tank guns and anti-tank guns in general, they don't work for my style of army. So it's a cool model, but I don't really see me using it outside of some sort of narrative battles. I then have the super light infantry gun. It's a light howitzer, so it fires. It's good for having very cheap HE. And what this basically is it's another mortar, guys, but it has the choice to fire direct as well, not just indirect, which can be useful because it means you don't have to wait for that 6 to zero in. It is only, like I said, a very light shell. The barrel's so short that between my friend group we've nicknamed it the chode gun, because the gun is genuinely wider than it is long. So, with the gun shield and everything. It's how I envisage using it is basically, mortars are really good in bolt action, and being able to take essentially 2 mortars is quite powerful. And it's cheap. It is cheap to do. So, yeah, really interesting little gun. I could definitely see myself fielding it as part of my artillery section in most games, just because it's cheap and it's more HE, and HE is very important in bolt action. So those are the big weapon teams. The flag guy, just to say, he can actually be run as a flag guy with special rules. I'll probably just run him as a guy with a rifle, essentially. I love armies that charge forward, bayonets and flags. I do it in 40k. And I do it in bolt action as well. You can't really... If I was to collect an allied army, the one I'd probably collect wouldn't be allies. It would probably actually be Comintern, and it would be the Soviet Union, because they also have a flag guy. And then I could... that'd just be cool. It's just cool, charging forward under a flag. Is it effective? No. Is it good battlefield doctrine? No. Does it lead to lots of people dying? Yes. Would I do it in real life? Probably not. But in terms of cinematics and battlefield, it's just cool, isn't it? At the end of the day, charging forward... under the banner. Always got to protect the banner. It's just cool. So supporting the weapon teams and the riflemen, I have 5 or 6 SMGs. These are for... I think it's 7. I've got 7 SMGs. That's because I can run 5 infantry squads, and each infantry squad can have a SMG sergeant. But if I want to play try-hard, I can also use 2 of the SMGs as officer models. Now, the reason you would do that, guys, is weird sort of quirky thing in bolt action. When you're equipping your officers, you just give them the weapon that they have, and it's free. You don't pay for it. So if you have an officer that's armed with a pistol, then he has to have the pistol, and it's not very good, but it doesn't cost him anything. But then, which, you know, a lot of armies do have officers with pistols, especially in early war armies. But when you get to late war, it's actually kind of interesting, because especially if you've got like Germans, and they can give their officers assault rifles, STG-44s, which are one of the best unit upgrades in the game, and they can have them for nothing, for no points, because the officer is armed with it, and officer weapons are basically, like I said, they're free. So it is a little bit of a quirk, but I guess the way they do it in bolt action is like, look, it's what the model's armed with, and at the end of the day, bolt action isn't a try-hard game. If you're going to do that, you are being a bit of a try-hard if you are doing that, but if it's historically accurate, fine. But also, at the end of the day, realistically, is having an extra shot on your officer really going to make a huge difference? And the answer is no, really. It's not like in 40k where if you gave every Space Marine captain a free Thunderhammer, things would just get broken really quickly. It would be the equivalent of, in 40k, of giving all your officers, bearing in mind you can only take 2 officers, but let's say in 40k and Imperial Guard, it would be the equivalent of giving all your officers bolters for free. At the end of the day, even if you took 3 platoon commanders and 3 company commanders, are 6 bolters on your officers going to make a huge difference to the impact of the game? No. And I can say that with some confidence, guys, because my Steel Legion army, all the officers get bolters and all the sergeants get bolters, and I don't think they've ever killed anything in the dozens of games that I've used them in the tournament that I took them to. You know, those bolters, I used to think it was really cool. Give all your sergeants bolters, everyone gets an 18-inch rapid fire weapon. Waste of time. So yeah, I guess that's how they see it in Warlords. Like, it's not going to make a huge difference. It's literally, you have it at most like an 8-point upgrade for free. It's nothing. What action is casual, guys? It's not a try-hard game. It's just fun. It is pretty well balanced. It's more balanced than 40k is by a long way. If you play it as intended, if you play Allies versus Axis, you will have a balanced game. It does get a bit squiffy if you do Axis versus Axis, like Japanese versus Germans. That's actually a really difficult matchup because the Germans get loads and loads of extra shots. They are the firepower faction. They're like the Tau of the faction, but not with all the stupid stuff. And and Japanese are the close combat faction, so it can be very difficult when you're just charging into a hail of bullets. But even then, it's not unbalanced to the point where you can't win. It's just maybe 55% in the favour of the Germans and 45% favour of the Japanese, which is the same with most games that you can go into. So backing up the SMGs and just mentioning officers, backing up them, I've got 3 light machine guns. They can be used either as a light machine gun section or as a squad upgrades. And then I've got a sniper team. Always having a sniper team is really important. You don't realise how much of an impact it's having when you're using one if your opponent doesn't have one. But if you don't have one and you come across someone who does, and you run yours as regular and they run theirs as veteran, like I did, then you find out very quickly that it's annoying not having a sniper and how much of an impact a sniper can have on a battlefield. So highly recommend snipers. And then I've got an anti-tank rifle team. I like anti-tank rifles. I think they're a really cool sort of quirk of sort of interwar period and World War II. They're not very effective, unfortunately, and what I actually find anti-tank rifles to be good at doing is just absolutely blasting an enemy unit, an enemy infantry unit rather than a vehicle, because it has +2 to wound. If you don't think of this in 40k terms, it's got +2 to wound. So firing, and you can target characters in bolt action. There's none of this if you hide behind units thing. It's old school. So if you've got an enemy character and you can just keep slinging anti-tank rifle rounds at him, you only need to get that one hit, and then you're even against a veteran character, you're going to be wounding it on, instead of 5s, you're wounding it on 3s. Against regular characters, you're wounding it on 2s. So it's actually good for just really really blown away characters, and that's the way I tend to use it. And actually, against some of the regular opponents, I was playing against before lockdown, it became a bit of a scourge. And when I was getting into action, I was learning with my brothers brothers and I, Russian is kind of like a joint army that we used to get into it. I used to take a section of anti-tank rifles, 3 of them, and my brother feared them because 3 anti-tank rifles got a good chance of hitting a character. Not a definite chance, but a decent chance of hitting a character. And you only need to hit once, and if and you'll probably blow away the attendant first, but then next time you get them, you can get that character. So they are actually really good character hunters, anti-tank rifles. Anti-character rifles, they should be called. So backing up the anti-tank rifle, we then have the armour of the force. I know we'll stick with the infantry. So we actually have, in terms of continuous support stuff, we have the suicide anti-tank guys. So bolt action it's historically accurate, and that means it kind of has a license to go places that some games wouldn't go. And it is historically accurate that, especially in the late war, when the Japanese started coming up against quite hefty quite hefty Allied armour, they had to resort to desperate tactics. They had to resort to people suicide charging into tanks with improvised explosive devices, and it is brutal and it is grim, but that is what happened. So it's pretty crazy, and you're allowed to take up to 3 of them in your Japanese army, and they can suicide into vehicles. Now, I think Warlords have got it right. You can't suicide them into infantry. It's not that kind of suicide attack. It is if you can only do their suicide attack into an enemy vehicle. That's it. If you do, then they get +8 to wound. So. And if you manage to charge them in and blow them up into the side of the enemy vehicle, that's +9 to wound. If you get, which is likely, you can do that. Yeah, so they're interesting, and you can make them veteran, and they'll be -1 to hit because they're a lone target, and then they're veteran, so you can only wound them on 5s, and then there's a lot of stuff you can do to make them very interesting. I have found they are liability and kill points games though, because each one gives away a kill point. So they are, and even if one flies into an enemy tank and blows it up, in terms of kill points, you're only trading 1 for 1. I mean, yeah, the tactical impact of blowing up the enemy tank is important, but the strategic impact is just it's 1 victory point each. So then we have the officers and the characters basically. So I've got 4 officers. I've got a junior officer with a katana. The katana's really cool. It actually works in combat. And basically, if you kill a guy, you get the chance to attack again and kill another guy. So I've got the katana, and then I've got a senior officer. The junior officer is the one that's running forward with it. The senior officer is the one that's got his katana in a scabbard and is like pointing down at something. I actually originally thought that was an umbrella, so I apologise to the ancestors, but I actually thought that it was an officer with an umbrella, which is one of the reasons why I picked it. And then I found out it was a katana. I was like, well, this is still good. But I did quite like the idea of this noble Japanese officer running around with an umbrella. And then I've got a political officer. I can't pronounce it. It's the guy with the white armband and the pistol, and he also has a katana. They're actually quite good at. They're good for if you have very, very inexperienced units called green units. He can make them better to make it shorter. There's a chance when green units get shot at the first time that they just poo their pants and get almost combat ineffective. The political officer being around, basically, he has the chance of saying, no, do your job, do your duty. And then I've got Baron Nishi, who's a senior officer on horse, and you can actually put him on horse. Again, it's one of the reasons why I just love the Japanese army. It's if I could put my Imperial Guard officers on horses, I know Death Corps could do it a bit, but they could only order Death Corps units. Like I'm talking about, if I imagine you could put your company commander on a horse, how cool would that be? I mean, you can do it from a modelling point of view. Don't get me wrong, you can do it, but it's modelling for disadvantage from a competitive point of view. But and it wouldn't you wouldn't get any bonus. But if you're on a horse in action, I believe it does give you like movement bonuses. Again, this is one of the reasons why I chose the Japanese faction. Your officers are on horses. They have swords. The German officers are running around on foot with camouflage and assault rifles, and it's all very try hard. It's all very wacko in my opinion. You know, the Japanese officers, they're, you know, riding around on horses, and they've got swords, and they charge with fixed bayonets under the flag of the rising sun. It's very cool. I mean, it's not effective, but it's very cool. So that's why I just like the army. And again, that officer has a katana. He's an officer on horse with a katana. Amazing. Then I've got the support sort of characters. So I've got a spotter, who's the guy lying down with the binoculars and the leaves on his hat. Really like that model. And then you've got the artillery observer, who is the guy with the really cool sort of artillery binoculars on a stand. And then you've got the air observer, who's the chap with the coordinates and the telephone. And then I've got another sort of observer guy who's, you know, I use him as he's a guy with a rifle and like a phone. And he can be used as an air observer as well, or an artillery spotter. He can be used as, or a regular spotter. He can be used as anything. He's a bit of a catch-all model. I actually tend to just use him as an attendant for if I'm playing narratively and I'm not running 2 SMG guys as officers. Then I'll run my officer with katana, umbrella katana, and the chap with the phone and the rifle as his attendant, because it's just cool. Yeah, that's the way I do it. And then I've got another support character who is the medic. Yeah, so that's five characters. Yeah, and medics actually do have rules. They basically give a 6-up feel no pain, which when everyone has only got 1 wound is quite good. It's a tricky one with the medic though, because he is quite expensive, and you know he has to. You're not going to get that many opportunities for 6s, so he has to save 3 models, which means 18 dice. So he would work well in a Japanese bamboo spear fighter army, when you just take like 90 spear fighters and just bands out across the board, and that's like an actual cheese army that Japanese can do. So that's all the infantry gone through, and then sort of last but not least by any means, we've got the armour. So the armour of the force is interesting, to say the least. So starting from lightest to heaviest, we've got, well, it's joint lightest because the Japanese have got, well, my army's got 2 light vehicles. I've got the Vickers Crosley armoured car, the 1928. That was actually an import model. Basically, when the Japanese were sort of first reaching out and grabbing land, they didn't have their own sort of in-house armoured vehicle production. They were building it up and they had a bit, but they still relied heavily on buying stuff from other large imperial powers. Well, you know, the existing large imperial powers. And, you know, one of the things that the British were doing a lot during the interwar years was selling stuff. So, and one of the things that they sold to the Japanese was this armoured car. Now, this is an early war armoured car, but as with anything in the Japanese, they pretty much used the stuff from the early war, you know, especially when things started going sideways all the way up to late war. Now, these were used for sure in the occupation of Singapore, but you know, especially when you're looking at when the Russians at the very end of the war started, you know, invading Manchuria, and the Kwantung Army with the Japanese to try and hold them back. And the Kwantung Army at that point was basically using all reserve gear because all the goods. It was meant to be the pride of the Japanese army, and it was at the beginning, but it had essentially had all the good stuff stripped out to fight the Americans, and all the reserve stuff replaced in it. All the good stuff replaced with reserve stuff, and so they would have been using reserve armoured cars like this. So it can be used in both early and late war. Same goes for the Hargo, Type 95 Hargo light tank. I mean, the Japanese called it a tank. Everyone out, you know, Wikipedia doesn't even grace it with that moniker. It's an armoured vehicle. It doesn't even grace it with armoured fighting vehicle. It's just an armoured vehicle. And you know what? I don't blame them because it is so light. So the light tank, the Hargo, the small one with the camo pattern on it, has the same armour as the armoured car. In fact, the only reason it's more expensive is that it comes with a low velocity light anti-tank gun, which means it is a really bad light anti-tank gun. And in fact, when shooting at targets over long range, it has the same armor penetration as an anti-tank rifle shooting at normal range. So yeah, it's very light. I don't run the Hargo as an anti-tank thing. The Japanese actually put a medium machine gun in the back of their tanks for two reasons. One, if someone was trying to get around the back, you could get on the light machine gun and just spray at them. It's all round point defense, which is cool in theory, but in reality didn't really come up. And also because you can turn the turret round and then you can use it as a dual medium machine gun vehicle. And this army, if I want it to, can run 5 medium machine guns, 2 on the armoured car, 2 on either tank, and 1 medium machine gun team. And that is actually, even Germans would blush at that level of machine gun firepower. You know, I faced Germans with this list and they weren't running that many medium machine guns. So it is good. It is good just to spray down like 25 medium machine gun shots a turn. But otherwise, and that is essentially how when I run the Hargo, it's either as a narrative thing or an early war thing, and it's just cool, especially when running it in early war and when you're not going to be coming across much heavy armor at all. Especially, you know, if you're talking when you're facing allies in the Pacific. I mean, a lot of them didn't even have a huge amount of armor. A lot of, especially when they were fighting a lot of colonial troops at the beginning, and you know, the Americans weren't really ready for the Japanese at the time, so there wasn't a huge amount of armor on both sides. On both sides, but the Japanese did have the armor advantage, I believe, at the time, because their armor was very light and fast, and they were the more experienced army at the time. They'd been fighting the Chinese for like 7 years, so they knew their armor wasn't great, but they knew how to use it. When running this army at like 500 points or 1,000 points early war, being able to turn up with 2 armored vehicles, yes, light armored, but you won't be facing a lot of anti-tank in the early war, who can put out, and I can have 5 medium machine guns in total. It's really, really powerful, and you don't really need more than the low velocity light anti-tank gun and the anti-tank rifle when facing early war armor. So it's quite effective. Now, moving on to the big boy. This is the Type 97 Kai Shinto Chi-Ha. So it's the upgraded version of the Chi-Ha tank. This was probably one of the better tanks that the Japanese had. The more common variant was just the Type 97 Chi-Ha without the Kai Shinto. And I'm butchering the pronunciation, and I apologise. But basically, and that would have been the more accurate option to go for. And it's basically a medium tank with a light howitzer. And I don't really need the light howitzer if I'm running the equivalent of 2 Morths already. So I wanted the version after a few games where I've played 3 games and I managed to win 1 through pure dumb luck, and I got crushed in the other 2 because I had a lack of mobile anti-tank. So I realised that my medium anti-tank gun just wasn't cutting it, and I needed it to be mobile, so it could move and could respond to threats rather than just sealing off an area where the enemy would then just ignore it or just mortar it to death. So that's why I went for the Kai Shinto. Yes, not as many of them were made, but from a tactical point of view, if this vehicle was included in the army to try and bring it up a competitive step, you know, without going the full cheese, try hard bamboo spear fight spam army, which I'll probably speak about in another video because this video is already going on 28 minutes. But I feel like, you know, I've rambled a bit, but I've gone through detail about each unit and why I've picked it and the historical precedent of it. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Now, to get a little armchair generals on you, and to sort of acknowledge a couple of problems historically with the army, which is the camo scheme that I've put on the vehicles. It's not. I mean, it's more of, it's cool, and it was used. But it's not. I don't believe it's actually a late war camo scheme, whereas the Kai Shinto was a late war tank. So I could be wrong there. And obviously by the end of it, they were painting whatever they were rolling out whatever they could. But yeah, it's just to acknowledge that maybe in general with the army, the colour scheme isn't 100% historical. For example, the Japanese officers had a darker green uniform. I didn't paint them in darker green. And like I said, the tanks won't necessarily be 100% accurate. And the armoured car was actually, it could have been this colour, but it was more likely a darker green colour. So, and I haven't associated this army with a specific Japanese regiment, which is what some historical players would want you to do. I feel like with this army, I've sort of walked a fine line between what was historically likely and historically available, and what is cool, but also what was relatively, from a hobby point of view, simple and easy for me to put together. I didn't. Not all. Whilst some of the whilst the Japanese could have had like green helmets, I mean, a lot of the time the helmet color would have been the same as the uniform, and they would and the webbing straps would have been more likely been white than the light brown that I use, and same on the boots, the boot straps that crisscross. Look, like I said, the point is that this army is a balance of historically accurate and also fun to paint, but also cool. I didn't want the officers to be in different colours, because then they wouldn't have looked like part of the army. You know, and I didn't want the vehicles all to be, you know, the armoured car can be a different colour because it's early war, like, but I wanted my tanks to match. You know, I wanted a similar colour scheme across the army. So that was it, guys. Really, I don't think there's any major flaws. I just think for some people who will be really, really into the historicals, there will be some bits that will annoy them. And I just wanted to explain, you know, the reason why I did it the way I did it. And it's also, I'm playing bolt action, which is definitely more of an arcadey game. You know, if I was to get more into historicals, and I have to admit, my interest has really been started to be drawn that way, with just how there's a lot about World War II I didn't know. I knew a fair amount about World War One. World War One was kind of was my jam, because I always like to be a bit different. So I went for the war that was a bit old, a bit more obscure. Until recently, you know, it feels like 1917 wasn't that popular. But there's a lot of them learning about World War Two, and yeah, it's drawing me into to historicals. There, I can definitely see myself, not right away, but I can definitely see myself in the future picking up an additional bolt action army or two even. I would like to probably go for the US Marines, so I could have a comp. So if I was playing, you know, introducing someone into bolt action, I could have two armies that were well known for fighting each other, and I could use late war and early war and medium war stuff all in it. I could go Russians. You know, it would be cool to have a Russian army. You know, it's sort of one of each faction, so, you know, communist, allies, and fascist. But for now, the Japanese are done. And for now, my sort of love affair with bolt action will be done for the time being. Where I'm going to be going next, guys, is back into 40k, jumping straight back in, and I'm probably looking at my Orksies. But depending on what happens with this, you know, for those of you who sort of watched my video that I put out on Friday, for those of you that know about this YouTuber event that's coming up, if it turns out I do get an invite for that, and just to let you guys know, I haven't had an invite yet. I should have mentioned that at the beginning of this, so I'll probably pin it in the comment section if I remember to do that. But I haven't had an invite yet. Look, I think there's a good chance I'm not going to get an invite. We'll see. You know, I am still small fry, but all I can say, guys, is just a massive, massive thank you to everyone that did go over and comment on the Winter's Battle and other Winter's video and other videos that, you know, some of the big YouTubers have been putting out there. And, you know, and for emailing SM Battle. It ain't over yet. I say, you know, we give it a week or so. Give it to the end of the week. I'll mention it in most of my videos. You know, come on, guys, let's keep the momentum going. I say we give it a week, and then if we haven't received anything, then we can probably expect that they're too afraid to face the might of the hammer of the Emperor. But But yeah, but there's but if I do get an invite, then obviously, of course, you know, sorry, Orcsies, but it's probably going to be 4 months of me painting guardsmen like a madman to try and put together the best army I can do to face to go to that tournament. I think there's definitely, if we do get an invite, we'll talk about it some more and, like, you know, what should I turn up with and all that kind of stuff. But we'll leave it there for now, guys. Like I said, I'm going to keep mentioning the event throughout the week, just to, you know, keep interest, you know, keep the momentum going, keep the offensive going. But yeah, anyway, guys, we'll leave it there. 35 minutes of me going through a detailed explanation of my bolt action from start to finish. I'm sure many of you are like, God, I don't want to hear any more about the Japanese, talk about Warhammer again. But I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Please let me know what you think. I hope you have, hope you've enjoyed this little distraction, this little divergence into bolt action. I do highly recommend anyone who's thinking about getting into it to try it out. It is fun. It is different to 40k. I imagine, you know, at first you'll find it very refreshing, and then you'll probably find it a bit frustrating, and then you'll find that you'll go back to 40k and you'll find that even more frustrating, and then you'll realize the bolt action is really fun. But I just really recommend that. I really recommend that people check out bolt action. It's a really fun game, and I guess it's one of those when you're not as invested in the army, you can play it a bit more carefree, and it's really cool. So, but yeah, let me know what you think of the army. You know, any of the historical warriors that I've got, please let me know if I am right or wrong about those. And of course, you know, just let me know how your bolt action projects and your Warhammer projects are going. Big thing with this, last thing to say, this is actually the first army where I have built, painted every model, and I can say with confidence that it is now completed. Level 1 was getting 1,000 points together, but it wasn't very effective. This is level 2, where I have about, I'd say probably about 2,000 points-ish now painted, maybe about 1,500 points painted. And it's more competitive. If I was to go for stage 3, that would be just more of being a collector, getting all the buttons. So I'd like to get a tankette, just because with Recce, because that would be cool. I'd like to get a Key light tank, which is the one where they took the light howitzer turret and put it in the Hargo and made it actually effective. I'd like to get a regular Type 97 Chi-Ha. So those are the sort of 3 vehicles that I'd have my eye on: a tankette, a souped up Hargo, and a souped down Kai Shinto, all Type 97. And then in terms of support, I'd probably, support, the one I've got my eye on for support, I'd get the big howitzer, like the heavy one. And then maybe the AA gun, because apparently the AA gun with twin autocannons is really cool and really good. So those are the 2 other things that I'd get there. And then in terms of infantry, the only things that I maybe consider is getting a squad of bamboo spear fighters. Maybe, although they are very cheesy, but maybe doing a squad of bamboo spear fighters. And the only other thing after that would be to consider going for the SNLF, which is Special Navy Landing Force, which was actually the Marines of the Japanese, and they're very cool. And they can actually take 2 SMGs per squad, so they're actually, in terms of that, actually is effective with only getting 2 chances of tough fighter. So yeah, but if to do that would be, you know, wave 3 would be more armor, and then wave 4 would be the remaining support weapons, and then wave 5 and 30 infantry, and then wave 6 would be wave 5 would be the SNLF. That's how I'd probably, if I was to do any additional waves, I would go for armor, 1 support weapon and a box of Japanese Marines, the last support weapon and a box of Japanese Marines, and then I would have everything. But I don't know if I necessarily want to do that, because I kind of have enough infantry and I could just run them as SNLF and no one would really care in my circle. Anyway, guys, 40-minute video, big old video. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. Long story short, the Japanese army is 100% complete. This is the first time that I have done an army from start to finish 100%. Not even my Steel Legion. There's still about 20 models up there which need finishing and painting. So this is a big milestone for me. And I think this year is potentially going to be the year of finishing projects off. I always get them to like 90 to 95%. My G-Silical, my Secret Project, my Black Templars are all about 90 to 95% done. And this year could be the year of just finishing projects alongside continuing the Great Mordian Restoration project. Anyway, guys, hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching. And of course, I'll see you guys next time.